At 2:15 a.m., the night over the Dnipro River looked like a sheet of black glass, silent and indifferent, unaware of the violence sleeping beneath its surface. High above the water, stretching across the river like an iron spine, stood the old highway bridge that had carried half a century of traffic, commerce, and war. For the Russians crossing it tonight, it was supposed to be nothing more than another link in a chain of logistics. A necessary stretch of concrete connecting their rear depots to the southern front. But for Ukraine, the bridge had become something else entirely. It was bait, it was the stage, it was the execution chamber. The convoy began rolling onto the bridge in the dim early hours, a 5-mile serpent of steel groaning forward under its own weight. More than 300 vehicles crept along the asphalt. Tanks, troop transports, ammunition carriers, fuel trucks, radar vehicles, command posts. Everything needed to feed and maintain 10,000 soldiers who were running critically low on ammunition. The Russians believed this convoy was the key to reclaiming momentum at the negotiation table in Washington. A quiet but unmistakable reminder that Russia still had claws, still had leverage, still had a military that could threaten and overwhelm if denied concessions. Moscow had gambled on spectacle, and this convoy was the spectacle. A Russian staff officer in a command truck halfway across the bridge leaned back in his seat, satisfied. The NEBOM radar system further behind the convoy swept the sky with lazy power. Mobile pant, CRS-1 units trundled along, their operators bored half asleep, convinced nothing could touch them beneath their envelope of electronic protection. The officer allowed himself a smile. Everything was proceeding on schedule. Checkpoint Charlie passed. 50% of the objective crossed, no threats detected. He didn't know it, but in that same instant, just a few meters beneath his boots, invisible in the tangle of steel beams supporting the bridge, 12 small objects were beginning to wake. The drones had been there for 72 hours, clamped to the understructure like barnacles on a ship's hull, each one disguised as rusted maintenance equipment, motionless, silent, waiting for a single razor-thin data packet that would tell their AI brains to come alive. They were Kajak Ryboth FPV drones of Ukrainian manufacture, cheap, durable, brutally precise, and nearly autonomous. Unlike the kamikaze drones the Russians expected, these didn't rely on GPS or remote pilots, both of which Russian jammers could easily disrupt. These used the bridge itself as a map. Every weld, every bolt, every crossbeam had already been scanned and stored inside their neural cores. They were dormant ghosts waiting for the moment they would begin to hunt. The Ukrainian operator in a nondescript bunker miles away had been watching all night, monitoring satellite feeds, calculating movement patterns, updating predictive models. When he saw the convoy slow down right in the middle of the bridge, he knew the AI had been right. The cause was embarrassingly simple: Russian truck tires, cheap, unreliable, overburdened. A handful had begun to fail after the long journey. Drivers swerved, braked, cursed, and the convoy compressed into a dense cluster right in the kill zone. The operator inhaled slowly. This was the moment. He pressed a single key. A data packet, exactly 1 millisecond long, burst into the night. On the underside of the bridge, 12 dull green indicator lights blinked on. 1 minute later, the electromagnetic clamps released. For a heartbeat, the drones dropped in freefall. Then their motors spun to life in a soft, insect-like hum. They stabilized 3 feet above the dark water, barely visible in the shadows of the concrete pylons. The convoy above rumbled onward, masking their presence entirely. The drones formed 3 pre-programmed strike groups and skimmed across the water like low-flying fish, keeping the pylons between themselves and any potential observers on the shore. Their AI brains fired at hundreds of calculations per second. LiDAR sensors mapped the underbelly of the bridge and adjusted flight paths with surgical precision. Every second, they got closer to the designated ascent points where they would rise and strike. The Russians remained oblivious. The lead battalion's radio operator made his routine check-in, all systems nominal, no threats detected, but not everyone was so confident. Inside one of the Pantsir vehicles, a young lieutenant frowned at his radar display. A flicker of noise, a dip in signal consistency, something subtle but real. 99 times out of 100, this kind of interference meant nothing. A stray reflection off the river, a software quirk, temperature variation. But something tugged at his instinct. He hesitated. His captain dozed beside him, unconcerned. The lieutenant swallowed, then made his decision. He switched from passive scanning to active radar pulse. A needle of raw energy lanced downward. For one perfect instant, the radar saw everything beneath the bridge. A clean lock snapped onto a target. The lieutenant didn't ask for permission. He didn't call it in. His finger tightened on the trigger. A 57E6 missile launched with a roar, streaking downward, 30 feet below, a $50 Ukrainian decoy, programmed to activate the moment the Pantsir went active, came to life. The missile annihilated it in a brilliant orange explosion that shook the girders. For the Russians, the explosion meant only one thing: contact. Radios erupted with alarm. Drivers panicked. The convoy ground to a halt in a mass of screeching brakes and swerving trucks. Soldiers scrambled out of vehicles, shouting in confusion. The carefully arranged column dissolved into chaos. Below them, the real drones paused. They had survived detection, but now they had lost the element of surprise. The drones didn't panic. Panic was for humans. Their AI instantly executed countermeasures. The 11 remaining drones shifted into a perfect 90-degree beam maneuver relative to the Pantsir's radar. Their radial velocity dropped towards zero. To the radar's filtering algorithm, they effectively ceased to exist. A single drone activated its onboard jammer, blasting the Pantsir with X-band noise. The lieutenant's screen dissolved into blinding static. He cursed, frantically trying to reacquire targets, but the ghosts were gone. The drones slipped back behind the girders, silent shadows once more. They waited, they listened, they recalculated. Human fear and Russian confusion bought them precious seconds. But chaos has a way of summoning power. 70 miles away at 30,000 feet, an A-50 Bereave early warning aircraft received the alert. Its Shmelem radar array activated instantly. Unlike the ground units, this airborne sensor suite saw everything: heat signatures, vibrations, micro-reflections of composite material against cold concrete. To the A-50, the drones glowed like embers in darkness. It relayed target locks to the Pantsirs and to an S-400 missile unit 50 miles away. The Ukrainian operator saw the warning flash across his monitor. An S-400 was locking onto the drones. A missile designed to destroy stealth aircraft was now hunting tiny autonomous machines the size of backpacks. The drones had seconds. Their AI did not attempt to flee. The physics alone made that impossible. Instead, one drone triggered Protocol Omega-7. A hatch popped open. 100-foot fiber line unraveled in a blink. At its end dangled a cylindrical AL-50 decoy. It sampled the S-400 Seeker's radar and responded with an amplified reflection. The drone's electronic shadow turned into a towering phantom. The missile veered, deceived. It slammed into the decoy and detonated in a brilliant fireball that lit up the river and sky. A $3 million missile defeated by a device the size of a soda can. The A-50 operators sat stunned. Their radar had just been humiliated. For a second, a painful silence filled the cockpit, but that fireball, unintended as it was, became the pivot point of the entire operation. Every Russian eye looked upward, every radar dish tilted skyward, every gunner stared into the fading smoke, and that was when the Ukrainian AI made its final calculation. The drones surged upward as one. No more stealth, no more hiding. They accelerated with sudden ferocity, electric motors whining at maximum throttle as they ascended toward the underside of the road deck. They weren't aiming at trucks anymore. They were aiming at the bridge. One after another, the drones drove their shaped, charged warheads directly into the designated support points, locations selected days earlier by engineers who studied the bridge's blueprints. They hit like needles punching into bone. The fuses waited exactly 1 seconds, enough time for all drones to embed themselves deep into the structure. Then the world split open. 12 shaped charges detonated beneath the deck in a confined space between the bridge and the river. The resulting blast wave ricocheted off the water, compressed, amplified, weaponized into a directional hammer. Concrete pillars shattered sideways under pressure they were never designed to withstand. Rebar twisted like wire ripped from a notebook. Support beams bent, snapped, tore. The deck fractured into massive slabs that tilted into empty space. Above, the lead ammunition truck toppled forward into the collapsing section. Its cargo, stacked with volatile charges, erupted into a chain reaction. In seconds, the convoy center became a volcano of fire and shrapnel. Fuel tankers went next, transforming the air into a furnace. Vehicles were hurled into the river like toys dropped from a child's hand. The 5-mile metal snake was decapitated, gutted, and burned alive. The bridge collapsed in a grinding roar that echoed through the valley. Half of it folded into the river. The rest hung in twisted agony, cables snapping like whips. What remained of the convoy slid, crashed, and rolled into the abyss. The night that had been so silent minutes earlier was now filled with screaming metal and exploding ammunition. In the Ukrainian command post, the operator watched the seismic sensors confirm structural collapse. He closed his eyes for a moment, not in celebration but in relief. The plan had worked. The drones had survived long enough. The timing had been exact, and the cost, less than $10,000 in hardware and a single tiny pulse of data. Across the strategic map, the implications rippled instantly. 10,000 Russian troops on the southern front were cut off from resupply. Their ammunition clock began ticking downward. Moscow's bargaining chip for Washington had not just been weakened, it had been destroyed. 5 minutes, that was all it took. 5 minutes to erase a convoy. 5 minutes to collapse a bridge. 5 minutes to reverse the leverage of an entire war. And somewhere under the fractured remains of the bridge, the river flowed on, carrying shrapnel and secrets into the dark, indifferent sea.